Commander Zara Chen had been having what she generously called a spectacularly terrible day when the Galactic Council's golden shuttle landed in her backyard. Well, technically, it wasn't her backyard anymore since the mortgage company had foreclosed on her house 3 months ago. But the aliens didn't need to know that particular detail about human economic systems. Yet. She was currently living in what used to be the gardening shed, which she'd optimistically renamed Command Central, because calling it that place where I cry into instant ramen didn't have quite the same ring to it. The irony that she'd gone from commanding Earth's first interstellar defense grid to defending her right to squat in a 10 by 12 wooden box was not lost on her. Life had a sense of humor that would make a cosmic horror laugh. The shuttle touched down with all the grace of a ballet dancer having a seizure, crushing her neighbor's prized rose bushes in the process. Zara made a mental note to add interspecies landscaping damages to the growing list of things she definitely couldn't afford to pay for. 3 beings emerged from the craft, and Zara had to admit that after 5 years of isolation following Earth's cosmic quarantine, a polite way of saying, you people are too weird to play with the other species, seeing aliens again felt oddly nostalgic, like running into your ex at a coffee shop, if your ex had tentacles and a superiority complex the size of a small moon. The first was a Corvani, all flowing robes and crystalline face structures that caught the afternoon sunlight like a disco ball having an identity crisis. The second appeared to be from the hegemony of Vex, which meant it looked like someone had crossed a praying mantis with a corporate lawyer and somehow made it worse. The third was either the most fashionable fungus in the galaxy or a member of the mycelial collective trying very hard to look important. "Greetings, human," announced the Corvani in a voice that sounded like wind chimes being strangled. "I am High Counselor Veltar of the Galactic Council's Diplomatic Corps." Zara looked down at her current outfit, a bathrobe that had seen better decades and slippers that had definitely seen better life forms. "Well, this is embarrassing. Usually when galactic dignitaries drop by unannounced, I like to dress up a bit more. You know, put on pants, comb my hair, practice basic hygiene. The usual diplomatic protocols." The mantis lawyer creature clicked its mandibles in what might have been amusement or hunger. With their species, it was always a 50-50 shot. "We are here on urgent business, former Commander Chen. The Council has need of your unique expertise." "Oh, how delightfully vague," Zara replied, crossing her arms. "Let me guess. Someone started a war, broken something important, or accidentally genocided themselves again? Because honestly, after the last time I tried to help the galactic community, I'm thinking my expertise might be better suited to teaching advanced ramen preparation." The fungus being pulsed various colors before speaking in a voice that sounded like autumn leaves gossiping about the weather. "There has been a discovery, an archaeological find that threatens to destabilize the known balance of power in this sector." Zara raised an eyebrow. "And this involves me how exactly?" "Last I checked, my archaeological credentials consisted of once digging up my grandmother's garden looking for her emergency whiskey stash. Spoiler alert, Grandma was very thorough in her hiding spots." High Counselor Veltar's crystalline features shifted into what might have been concern or indigestion. Honestly, alien facial expressions were still a work in progress for human interpretation. "The discovery was made on Earth, in your former command sector." "Ah." Zara felt that familiar sinking feeling that usually preceded either adventure or catastrophic failure. In her experience, the two were often indistinguishable until after the paperwork was filed. And I'm guessing this isn't the good kind of discovery, like finding out pizza grows on trees somewhere in the galaxy? Pizza does grow on trees, the Vex creature interjected helpfully. On Kepler 442b. Terrible soil conditions, though. Very acidic. The pepperoni tends to be carnivorous. Note to self, Zara muttered. Cross Kepler 442b off the vacation destination list, right next to anywhere that involves galactic politics. High Counselor Veltar gestured impatiently, which caused his robes to shimmer like oil on water. Former Commander, we need you to accompany us to the site immediately. The implications of what we've found could rewrite everything we thought we knew about galactic history. Zara looked around at her current kingdom, a shed, a broken lawnmower, and what might have been either a very sophisticated compost pile or the remains of her last attempt at growing vegetables. You know, normally I'd ask about compensation, travel expenses, hazard pay, and whether there's a decent dental plan involved. But given my current circumstances, she gestured broadly at the shed. Let's just say my negotiating position isn't exactly what you'd call strong. There will be compensation, the fungus being assured her. Standard council rates plus hazard bonuses. Define hazard, Zara said suspiciously. The three aliens exchanged what she was pretty sure were meaningful looks. Though with species this diverse, meaningful looks could involve anything from slight color changes to complete dimensional phase shifts. Perhaps, said High Counselor Veltar carefully, we should discuss this on the way. 20 minutes later, Zara found herself strapped into what the aliens optimistically called a safety harness, and what she privately thought of as that thing that's going to leave very interesting tan lines if I survive this. The shuttle's interior looked like someone had asked a committee of designers with severe communication issues to create the perfect transportation experience. Then let them work out their differences through interpretive dance. As they lifted off, Zara caught a glimpse of her former command post through the shuttle's viewing port. The Terran defense installation had been impressive once. A sprawling complex of communications arrays, defense platforms, and research facilities that had been humanity's first real attempt at joining the galactic community as equals, rather than as the weird cousins nobody wanted to invite to family gatherings. Now it looked like a very expensive modern art installation titled Optimism Abandoned. Or possibly, Why We Can't Have Nice Things, a study in bureaucratic failure. So, Zara said, settling back into her harness as Earth fell away below them. Anyone want to explain why my former workplace suddenly became archaeologically significant? Because last I checked, the most historically important thing there was the vending machine that occasionally ate your money, but gave you 2 candy bars instead of 1. The Vex creature's mandibles clicked rapidly, their version of nervous laughter, if Zara remembered her xenobiology training correctly. The discovery was made during the preliminary demolition surveys. Standard procedure before urban redevelopment. Wait. Zara held up a hand. Someone's demolishing the TDI? Who authorized that? The Earth Colonial Authority, High Counselor Veltar said, with the careful tone of someone delivering bad news to someone who was known to have strong opinions and access to weapons. The facility was deemed surplus to current defensive requirements, following Earth's withdrawal from active galactic participation. Zara stared at him for a long moment. Let me get this straight. Earth gets kicked out of the galactic community because we're too unpredictable and militaristic, and I'm paraphrasing their words here, not mine. So the response is to tear down our defensive installations? The logic does seem somewhat circular, the fungus being admitted. But bureaucracy rarely follows logical pathways, more of a meandering approach. Like a drunk person trying to find their keys in the dark, Zara muttered, while blindfolded and possibly on fire. The shuttle banked sharply, and through the viewing port, Zara could see the familiar outline of the North American continent spreading out below them. From this height, you couldn't see the political borders, the economic inequality, or the thousand small daily tragedies that made up human existence. It just looked like home. She'd missed this view more than she'd realized. So, what exactly did they find during this demolition survey? She asked. Ancient alien artifacts? Buried spaceships? A really old Starbucks? The three aliens exchanged those looks again. This time, Zara was pretty sure she caught some actual meaning in the exchange. Specifically, the universal expression of, "How do we explain this without sounding completely insane?" High Counselor Veltar cleared what might have been a throat. They found a line. Zara blinked. A line, he confirmed. Like a queue? People waiting for something? No, the vexed creature interjected. A literal line, drawn in the dirt, approximately 2 meters long, perfectly straight, oriented north-south. Zara stared at them. And this is archaeologically significant because, said the fungus being, its colors shifting to what Zara had learned indicated extreme nervousness. According to our dating analysis, that line was drawn approximately 50,000 years ago. And it matches exactly the mathematical precision of lines found at 17 other archaeological sites across the galaxy. Lines, Zara said slowly, that mark the boundaries of what we now know was the oldest and most advanced empire in galactic history. An empire that vanished so completely that until 6 months ago, we weren't even sure it had existed. The shuttle touched down with considerably more grace than its departure from her backyard. Apparently, alien pilots, like human ones, needed a few minutes to remember how their vehicles worked. Through the viewing port, Zara could see the familiar buildings of the TDI complex, though they looked oddly naked without their usual array of defensive systems and communication equipment. Yellow tape and construction barriers surrounded most of the facility, giving it the appearance of a crime scene that had been decorated by someone with a very specific fetish for municipal planning. The discovery site is in what used to be your personal quarters, High Counselor Veltar explained as they disembarked. The demolition crew was removing the foundation when they uncovered it. Zara felt a strange chill that had nothing to do with the afternoon breeze. My quarters? You mean the place where I lived for 3 years? The place where I spent most of my time complaining about paperwork and trying to figure out how to make coffee that wouldn't dissolve spoons. That would be the location, yes. They walked through the complex, passing familiar landmarks that now felt oddly foreign. The commissary where she'd had her first real conversation with an alien diplomat. The communication center where she'd spent countless hours trying to translate human military doctrine into something the Galactic Council's peacekeepers could understand. The small garden area where she'd attempted to grow tomatoes and had instead created what the base botanist had cheerfully described as a fascinating study in aggressive plant mutation. Her former quarters were located in the residential section of the complex, a modest apartment that had been her home during what she now thought of as the good years, back when humanity's future seemed full of possibilities instead of foreclosure notices and conversations with bill collectors. The demolition crew had cleared away most of the structure, leaving only the foundation and a carefully excavated area that was currently surrounded by more yellow tape than a paranoid detective convention. In the center of the excavated area, barely visible in the late afternoon sunlight, was a line. Not just any line. This was a line with serious commitment to its job. Perfectly straight exactly 2 meters long, oriented precisely north-south with the kind of mathematical precision that made engineers weep with joy and philosophers question the nature of reality. "That's it?" Zara asked, staring down at what looked like someone had dragged a stick through the dirt with exceptional attention to detail. "That's the archaeological discovery that's going to destabilize the known balance of power?" "Appearances can be deceiving," the vexed creature said diplomatically. "Yeah, well, so can my last 3 relationships. But you don't see me calling the Galactic Council about them." High Counselor Veltar activated a handheld device that projected a holographic display above the excavation site. The display showed the line in glowing blue, along with various measurements, dating information, and what appeared to be enough technical specifications to build a small spacecraft. The line was created using a crystalline substance that doesn't occur naturally anywhere in this solar system, he explained. The molecular structure is identical to materials found at 16 other sites across the galaxy, all of which have been dated to the same approximate time period. 50,000 years ago, Zara said, still staring at the line. Back when humans were just figuring out that hitting things with sticks was more effective than hitting things with rocks. Indeed. And yet this line was placed with precision that suggests access to advanced surveying equipment and a sophisticated understanding of planetary geography. Zara walked around the excavation site, studying the line from different angles. It really was remarkably unremarkable. Just a line in the dirt. Like something a bored child might draw while waiting for parents to finish talking about boring adult things. Except that it was 50,000 years old, and apparently marked the boundary of an interstellar empire that had vanished before human civilization had even figured out agriculture. "Okay," she said finally. "I'll bite. What's the theory?" Ancient aliens visited Earth 50,000 years ago and decided to mark their territory with the galactic equivalent of Kilroy was here? That's one possibility, the fungus being said carefully. There are others, such as. The 3 aliens exchanged another one of those looks. This time, Zara was absolutely certain she was seeing the universal expression of, "Okay, who's going to tell her the really crazy part?" High Counselor Veltar won the apparent mental coin toss. There is a possibility that humans are not as new to galactic civilization as previously believed. Zara felt that sinking feeling again, this time accompanied by what her grandmother would have called a powerful sense of impending doom mixed with aggressive curiosity. "Define not as new," she said slowly. "The Vrex Empire," the vexed creature said. The civilization that created these boundary markers was known for one particular characteristic that set them apart from every other spacefaring species we've encountered. Which was? They were aggressively egalitarian. Every species they encountered was offered full citizenship and representation in their government, regardless of technological development, cultural compatibility, or previous alliance structures. "Sounds nice," Zara said. "Very progressive. I'm sure it made for interesting dinner parties." They were also known, the fungus being added, for their exceptional adaptability and their tendency to establish colonies in environments that other species considered unsuitable for long-term habitation. Like desert planets, ice worlds, and planets with aggressive carnivorous weather patterns. High Counselor Veltar continued. "Or," said the vexed creature, "planets with unstable tectonic activity, unpredictable magnetic fields, and a disturbing tendency toward mass extinction events." Zara looked around at the Earth landscape surrounding them. The mountains in the distance, the forests, the perfectly normal-looking planet that had produced a species capable of both creating beautiful art and finding 17 different ways to argue about the proper way to load a dishwasher. "You're suggesting," she said slowly, "that Earth was a Vrex colony." "We're suggesting," High Counselor Veltar said carefully, "that the possibility exists, and that humans are descended from Vrex colonists who were stranded here 50,000 years ago when their empire collapsed. It would explain," the fungus being said hopefully, "certain unique characteristics of human psychology and social development." Zara stared at them. "Such as your species' exceptional adaptability, your tendency to form complex social hierarchies while simultaneously maintaining strong egalitarian ideals, your remarkable ability to cooperate with other species despite significant cultural and biological differences, our talent for aggressive problem-solving," the Vex creature added, "and your disturbing fondness for establishing settlements in locations that most sane species would consider uninhabitable. Plus," High Counselor Veltar concluded, "there's the matter of human creativity and innovation. Most species develop technology in predictable patterns following logical progression paths. Humans don't." Zara thought about this for a moment. "So, you're telling me that instead of being a young species that stumbled onto the galactic stage by accident, we're actually the descendants of an ancient interstellar empire that was so advanced they could mark planetary boundaries with mathematical precision 50,000 years ago?" "That is one possible interpretation of the evidence, yes. And this line, this perfectly straight 2-meter line that someone drew in the dirt beneath what used to be my bedroom, this is evidence that Earth was once part of the oldest and most advanced civilization in galactic history?" "According to our analysis, yes." Zara walked over to the excavation site and stared down at the line again. It really was an impressively straight line, she had to give it that. The kind of line that suggested someone had taken their job very seriously and had access to really good tools. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally. "Of course. If this theory is correct, if humans really are descended from this ancient empire, what happened to all the technology, the knowledge, the advanced civilization part?" The three aliens looked at each other again. This time the expression was clearly, "Oh good, she's asking the obvious questions." "Mass extinction events," High Counselor Veltar said simply. "Earth has experienced 5 major extinction events in the past 50,000 years. Ice ages, volcanic activity, asteroid impacts, climate shifts, any one of which would be sufficient to reset a civilization back to subsistence-level survival. But genetic memory persists, the fungus being added. Cultural patterns, social instincts, problem-solving approaches. These things survive even when the knowledge that created them is lost. It's like," the Vex creature said, apparently searching for an appropriate metaphor, "finding someone who can instinctively perform complex mathematical calculations but has no memory of ever learning mathematics." Zara nodded slowly. "So the theory is that humans have been unconsciously recreating Vrex technology and social structures because it's encoded in our cultural DNA. But we lost the instruction manual during one of our periodic planetary disasters. That would be consistent with the evidence, yes. And this line represents what exactly? A property boundary? A treaty marker? Ancient alien graffiti? Based on similar findings at other sites," High Counselor Veltar said, "we believe it marks the boundary of a protected zone. The Vrex were known for establishing areas where developing species could evolve without interference. Like a nature preserve, Zara said. But for sentient species. Exactly. Zara walked around the excavation site again, thinking. The afternoon sun was getting lower, casting long shadows across the abandoned facility. In a few hours, this would all be lit by floodlights and surrounded by security barriers, transformed from a place where she'd once lived into an archaeological site that might rewrite galactic history. The irony was almost too perfect. She'd spent 3 years living directly above evidence that could prove humanity's place in the galaxy was far more significant than anyone had imagined. And she'd never known it was there. She'd been literally sleeping on top of proof that humans weren't the galactic newcomers everyone thought they were. Okay, she said finally. Let's say this theory is correct. Let's say humans really are the descendants of this ancient empire. What happens now? That, High Counselor Veltar said, is why we need your expertise. My expertise in what? Because I have to tell you, my qualifications in ancient alien archaeology are pretty limited. I once watched a documentary about Stonehenge, but I was mostly focused on the snacks. Your expertise in human psychology and military tactics, the Vex creature said. If this discovery becomes public knowledge, it will fundamentally change humanity's status in galactic politics, and probably trigger at least 3 different territorial disputes, the fungus being added gloomily. Possibly a small war, maybe a large one, depending on how the hegemony of Vex reacts to the news. Wait, Zara said. The hegemony of Vex? As in, your people? She gestured toward the mantis lawyer creature. My government has strong opinions about territorial boundaries and historical claims, it admitted. If Earth was once part of the Vrex Empire, and if humans are the legitimate heirs to that empire, then certain existing territorial agreements might need to be reconsidered. Reconsidered how? Well, it said carefully, the Vrex Empire, at its height, controlled approximately 40% of this galactic sector, including several systems that are currently claimed by the hegemony. Zara stared at him. 40%? You're telling me that if humans are really the heirs to this ancient empire, we could potentially lay claim to 40% of local space? That's one possible interpretation of interstellar law, yes. And the other interpretation? The other interpretation, High Counselor Veltar said diplomatically, is that ancient territorial claims become void after 50,000 years, and any attempt to revive them would be considered an act of aggression against the current legitimate governments of those systems. Leading to war. Leading to war, the 3 aliens confirmed in unison. Zara looked down at the line again. 2 meters of ancient engineering that could potentially trigger an interstellar conflict. It was like finding out that the doodle you drew on your desk in 3rd grade was actually the trigger mechanism for a nuclear weapon. So, she said, what you're telling me is that this line, this perfectly innocent-looking line that someone drew in the dirt 50,000 years ago, could either establish humanity as one of the major powers in galactic politics, or start a war that could destabilize this entire sector of space. That's a very concise summary, yes. And you want my help because, High Counselor Veltar said, if this information becomes public, humans will need to decide how to respond. And that decision will determine whether we're looking at a new age of galactic cooperation or the beginning of a conflict that could last centuries. And you think I'm qualified to help make that decision? You commanded Earth's defense installation for 3 years, the Vex creature pointed out. You successfully managed first contact protocols with 17 different species. You're the only human who has practical experience in both military strategy and interspecies diplomacy. Plus, the fungus being added. According to our psychological profiles, you have a talent for finding unconventional solutions to apparently impossible problems. Zara laughed, though it came out sounding a bit hollow. Yeah, well, my last unconventional solution to an impossible problem involved living in a garden shed and eating ramen for 3 months straight. Not exactly what I'd call a diplomatic triumph. Nevertheless, High Counselor Veltar said, the Council believes you're the best person to help navigate this situation. Zara walked to the edge of the excavation site and stared down at the line one more time. 50,000 years old, marking the boundary of an empire that had spanned half the galaxy, created by beings who might have been her own ancestors, establishing a protected zone where a young species could develop without interference. The young species in question had eventually grown up to become humans. Argumentative, creative, stubborn, adaptable humans who had managed to both achieve interstellar flight and get themselves kicked out of galactic society within the span of a single generation. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course." "This protected zone that the line supposedly marks, how big is it?" High Counselor Veltar consulted his handheld device. "Based on similar sites at other locations, we estimate the protected zone encompasses approximately 1/3 of the North American continent. And the other sites you mentioned, the ones with identical lines, they're located on planets that are now home to species that have recently achieved spaceflight," the fungus being said. "All of them show evidence of similar protected zones established during the same time period. So the Vrex Empire didn't just mark one boundary on Earth. They established protected zones for multiple developing species across the galaxy." "That appears to be correct." Zara nodded slowly. "And when their empire collapsed, these species continued to develop on their own, unaware that they were living in what amounted to interstellar nature preserves. Until they achieved spaceflight and discovered the boundary markers. Like we just did." "Exactly." The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reminded Zara of why she'd fallen in love with Earth in the first place. Even after traveling to 17 different worlds and seeing sunsets that defied both physics and good taste, there was something about a simple Earth sunset that felt like home. "Okay," she said finally. "I'll help, but I have some conditions." "Name them." "First, I want full access to all the data about these other sites. If we're going to figure out how to handle this situation, I need to understand the full scope of what we're dealing with." "Agreed." "Second, I want a proper research team. Human researchers who can help analyze this from our perspective. Because, with all due respect to your expertise in galactic archaeology, you're not human. And if this really is about human heritage, we need human input." "That can be arranged." "Third," Zara said, "I want a guarantee that before any of this information goes public, all parties involved, including the hegemony of Vex and any other governments with territorial interests, will participate in diplomatic talks aimed at finding a peaceful solution. That may be more difficult to arrange," High Counselor Veltar admitted. "Then you'd better get creative," Zara said firmly. "Because the alternative is that I go public with this information myself, right now, and let the various galactic powers sort it out through whatever methods they prefer. And given that humans have apparently inherited a genetic tendency toward aggressive problem-solving from our ancient ancestors, I don't think you'd enjoy the results." The three aliens huddled together for a whispered conference that involved a lot of color changes, mandible clicking, and what sounded like crystalline wind chimes having a heated argument. "Acceptable," High Counselor Veltar said finally. We will arrange for diplomatic preliminary talks before any public announcements are made. Good. Zara looked down at the line one more time. And one more thing. Yes? When this is all over, when we've figured out whether humanity is going to claim our ancient birthright or pretend this never happened, when we've either started a war or prevented one, I want that line protected. Protected how? I want it declared a historical site, protected by interstellar treaty. No development, no construction, no tourist buses full of beings who want to take pictures of the thing that almost started a galactic war. May I ask why? Zara smiled, and for the first time in months, it felt genuine. Because 50,000 years ago, someone, maybe my ancestor, maybe yours, maybe someone whose species doesn't even exist anymore, took the time to draw a perfectly straight line in the dirt to mark the boundary of a protected space where a young species could grow up safely. She looked around at the abandoned military installation, at the Earth that had produced both Mozart and the atomic bomb, at the sky where somewhere among the stars, entire civilizations were probably arguing about the implications of a 2-meter line drawn in ancient dirt. And that someone was right. The species did grow up. We became exactly the kind of complicated, creative, stubborn, adaptable, argumentative people they probably hoped we'd become. We learned to reach for the stars, even if we haven't quite figured out how to do it without stepping on each other's feet. The sun had fully set now, and the first stars were becoming visible in the darkening sky. Somewhere up there, decisions were being made that would determine whether humanity's future would be shaped by its newly discovered past or by the choices it made in the present. So yeah, Zara said, I want that line protected. Because it's not just a boundary marker or an archaeological artifact. It's proof that someone, a long time ago, believed we were worth protecting, worth giving space to grow, worth the hope that we'd eventually figure out how to be worthy of that gift. She turned to face the 3 aliens, who were watching her with expressions that might have been respect, concern, or possibly indigestion. Alien faces were still tricky to read, even after all this time. Now, she said, let's go figure out how to keep that hope alive without accidentally starting an interstellar incident. Because if there's one thing I've learned about humans, it's that we have an absolutely remarkable talent for turning simple situations into complicated disasters. And for turning complicated disasters into unexpected triumphs, High Counselor Veltar observed. Yeah, well, Zara said, walking back toward the shuttle. Let's hope our ancient ancestors passed down the triumph gene along with everything else. Because something tells me we're going to need it. As they lifted off from Earth for the second time that day, Zara caught one last glimpse of the excavation site through the viewing port. The line was invisible in the darkness now, just another shadow among shadows. But she knew it was there. A perfectly straight, 2-meter reminder that sometimes the most important boundaries are the ones that protect space for growth rather than preventing it. 50,000 years ago, someone had drawn a line in the dirt and declared that this space belonged to the future. Now it was up to that future, argumentative, creative, stubborn, adaptable humanity, to decide what to do with the gift they'd been given. Zara settled back into her harness and started making mental lists of all the things that could go wrong with this plan, all the diplomatic disasters that could unfold, and all the ways that humanity's tendency toward aggressive problem-solving could turn a simple archaeological discovery into a galactic incident. It was going to be a very interesting few months. But then again, she reflected as Earth fell away below them once more. When had humanity ever done anything the easy way? They were the descendants of an empire that had spanned the galaxy, and then somehow managed to lose all memory of it during a series of planetary catastrophes. They were the species that had achieved interstellar flight and then gotten themselves kicked out of galactic society for being too unpredictable. They were the people who had lived for 50,000 years above proof of their own cosmic significance, and never even noticed it was there. If that wasn't human enough to make their ancient ancestors proud, nothing would be. The shuttle banked toward the stars, carrying its passengers toward whatever complicated future awaited them among the worlds where other lines had been drawn, other boundaries established, other young species given space to grow into whatever they were meant to become. Behind them, Earth continued its ancient rotation, carrying its cargo of complicated, creative, stubborn, adaptable, argumentative humans toward whatever destiny they would choose for themselves. And somewhere beneath the surface of an abandoned military installation, a perfectly straight line continued to mark the boundary between what had been and what might yet be. A 2-meter monument to the radical act of believing in the future. It was, Zara thought as the stars grew brighter around them, probably the most human thing imaginable.